Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Stakeholder Whispering Live. My name is Bill Shander, and I wrote a book called Stakeholder Whispering, and it's about how do we talk to our stakeholders? How do we understand what they really need from us before we do what they've asked us to do? Because sometimes those two things aren't the same. And as always, I have a guest with me today because I want to hear from other people and their experiences stakeholder whispering. You don't want to hear me talk about my book all day long. And my guest today is Russ Layton. Russ is the CEO and founder of a company called Sparks Hockey. And oh, look at that. Did everybody see this? That's the brand. And yeah, so Russ and I are friends. I've known Russ for, God, I guess 20 years or so at this point. Russ and I used to skate around on the ice on Friday mornings, and he would talk about this idea that he wanted to launch this company around sharpening skates and related things. So, Russ, I want you to introduce yourself to everybody. Tell us a little bit more about you and who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into it.
Perfect. So my name is Russ Layton. I am CEO and founder of Sparks, as Bill said. My background is I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been designing products for as long as I can remember. Even going back into high school, which led me to pursue a degree in mechanical engineering. I've worked in many different product development capacities, like many different industries, worked for product design firms all the way up to corporations designing products, and eventually reached a point in my career where I wanted to start something of my own instead of, just contributing to somebody else's product or company. And there was an unmet need, many different unmet needs that I sifted through. And as Bill kind of prefaced, this was one that was a personal need, which we will probably talk about, which I think is a really good start to creating a great product, is one that you very closely understand and are intimate with the problem and the need for a solution. So I wanted to solve my problem for skate sharpening, and to be able to do that myself in my own home versus having to go to a store somewhere to get that done. And we are now 12 years in and 50 employees in multiple countries. We sell in like 30 different countries, lots of business to business customers, thousands actually, and well north of 100,000 consumers also use our product. And so we're in the business of every aspect of a company, everything from, the nuts and bolts of engineering and innovation to sales and marketing and finance and distribution, manufacturing, sourcing and warehousing. I mean, everything you can imagine we're trying to do in a small company here in the United States. And through that experience and my other experiences in life, have run across lots of great examples of stakeholder whispering that I'd love to share today.
Yeah, and so actually, you bring up an interesting point, which is, yeah, when you have a personal problem, you're intimately aware of your own problems, your own concerns, needs to solve this, issue that you're facing, and that could be a good thing, as you said, because like you intimately know your pain points, but sometimes your own pain points aren't the same as everybody else's. So making sure that your pain points match the market isn't necessarily always so straightforward, is it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is like the fact that this is a problem that I so intimately understand from my perspective could be a blind spot to someone who's experiencing the same problems, maybe but from a different vantage point. I will say there are a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of founders, entrepreneurs that for one reason or another are aren't solving a problem from at least the perspective or position of it being a problem they want to solve for themselves. I think that would even be
Yeah.
harder, and you'd have the blind spot of not even understanding it from your own viewpoint as well as everyone else's. And I
Right.
was in that blind spot in most of my career. I mean, in consulting, we designed lots of products I would never use. Then I went into medical devices for probably a decade and could really not relate to many of the problems. And that's where I think really being good at listening and speaking to experts is paramount, because you obviously have no concept of the problem.
Yeah.
In our case, because we were the customer, it made being a startup a lot easier because I didn't have to pay to get access or work
Yeah.
very hard to get access. I could skate around the rink with you on a Friday morning. And it's great that you kicked off with that example because I've heard, you and I have talked about it in the past, and you bring that up, that thing where I was skating around with you and I was listening. I was
Yeah.
saying, Bill, I have this problem. Do you have this problem? And
Yeah.
like, here's how I'm solving it. How are you solving it? And I mean, God, that was the seed for what has become over a decade of work. So
Yeah. That's great. And the listening is the key. And so I got to tell the audience, I wrote this book. I wrote it a year ago, year and a half ago. It came out in the spring. And Russ found something that is so brilliant when he was sort of preparing for today's conversation about listening. And it's something that I missed. And I really wish I had known this ahead of time. I didn't call Russ and ask him for advice. Otherwise, maybe I could have found this information first and included it in the book. That's going to have to go in the second
yeah,
edition of the book. So, Russ, tell us about this very interesting thing you found out about listening.
yeah. So I've worked with a lot of introvert engineers over the years, and some of like the smartest people and people that I've relied on and really valued their opinion and their input are very quiet. And anybody who's in product design always knows like brainstorming is supposed to be like non-judgmental. You're supposed to give time and space for people who aren't going to try to be the first idea out to talk, because they're usually the people that like come out at the end and have like the brilliant idea. Like everybody else was like fighting for airspace. And then they come out and then everybody's like, oh, that's a really good idea. Maybe you should have spoke first. And so as an engineer and a product designer, I know how important it is to be quiet and listen with intention. And so when Bill had written this book and I was thinking about this interview, I thought it was a little bit ironic that the whole book's premise is about listening, but the title is about talking. And so it made me immediately think like, why didn't Bill choose the word, which is a parallel to whispering, on the listening side? And then I was like, I wonder if the English language actually doesn't have such a word. It doesn't have the talk with intention and purpose and quietly, because as we all know, oftentimes people who speak quietly are actually listened to more than people who speak loudly. So I was like, oh, is there an
Yeah.
English word for like listening quietly with intention? And sure enough, there isn't. But in the Asian societies and Asian languages, no surprise, because they tend to have kind of words for everything. There is a word called kiku, which is to ask a question with the intention of receiving knowledge. And the kanji actual translation, the kanji symbols for kiku are to listen with the ear straight to the heart. So it has those symbols in it. It has ear, straight, and heart. And I was just fascinated in preparation, as Bill said, for this. Like, there is a word for whispering on the listening side.
Yeah. I love that so much. And, so I spent a lot of time trying to find an alternative word instead of stakeholder. So I wasn't even thinking about whispering because I was thinking about, the horse whisperer, like that idea, like I was solid with, but I wanted to replace stakeholder because for all kinds of good reasons we wouldn't have to get into. So I did all kinds, I was looking at thesaurus, AI, Google, trying to replace the word stakeholder with something else. There's literally no alternative that I could find. But boy, if I had found that word, I completely could have made a title based on that word. So,
Yeah.
because it is about listening, and it's whispering in the sense of that intentionality and quiet and of course the idea of the horse whisperer that you can sort of magically get people to understand you if you speak in a certain way. But yeah, I love that idea. It is interesting. You mentioned that it's not just in Japanese; it's in other Asian languages as well, even in German. You said so.
Yep.
Very
German has
powerful
for it.
idea. Yeah, listening is key. And in our culture, and plenty of others, I'm sure, listening is not so easy to come by. When I think of culture broadly, um, right, maybe not broadly, maybe more narrowly, sometimes you can think of industries or you can think of role types. And I want to bring up something that I know you were planning to talk about today, which is, you started this company, and as a startup, I know you did a Kickstarter, but then of course you went and had to talk to real investors, right? Bigger investors to bring in bigger chunks of change. And I know that that process required some stakeholder whispering. So maybe the reason I bring it up in this, culture, right? Investors, type A's, they're giving you a ton of money. They want results. It's a very different world from, hey, I'm trying to solve a problem, around skate sharpening. So maybe tell us a little bit about that experience and how whispering came to help.
Yeah, and I'd say this ties in. You have a concept in your book, and I think it may be the title of a chapter or close to it. It says "Luck favors the prepared,"
Mm,
um, and we've all heard sayings similar to that. When I started raising money, one of the things being, I think, being a product designer and maybe intuitively or through training, being a good listener, every meeting that I had with an investor, I was talking, but I was 100% listening. And I I think I was rewarded for that very quickly and early. And I guess the concept that I would say to other entrepreneurs is when you there's another saying which I learned way later in my entrepreneurial journey, which is if you ask for advice, you're going to get money, and if you ask for money, you're going to get advice.
that
Um,
is good.
and
That's a
so
classic VC. Yeah.
yeah, and so what I would do is in every meeting, I would hear the questions being asked. And before the next meeting, I would make sure I answered that question and I had lots of data to support it. And then I would distill it down to a slide in the deck in the appendix.
Mm,
And it's funny because it's such a simple concept. And as I interface now that I'm later in my career and I've done this and been somewhat successful and I'm doing my own angel investing now, I'm always I can tell the entrepreneurs that I meet that are listening to the questions that I'm raising and are sort of like giving me excuses for the answer to that question, and sort of like they're never going to worry about that question again, and they're going to go ask the next investor, or they're going to present to the next investor who may ask the same question, and they're going to have done no work in between those two meetings.
yeah.
A super secret weapon was every meeting I went to, I then prepared the answer. And the next time, in like without, you could set your watch to it. The next meeting I'd go to, I would get to that point in the meeting deck or so, and they'd ask that question. And I would say, it's funny that you asked that question. I thought the same thing. And let me tell you a little bit about how we're handling that, or how we're treating that, or what we're going to do about competition, or about IP, or about whatever, how we position the product. And when I had that answer, not only did it like answer the question, it just crushed in that meeting. Cause that
Right.
person was like, that person, every time they would pivot to a new, like they'd think they had a gotcha question. And I had a really, even if it wasn't like a great answer, just listening to the previous person and providing that answer, like it just made, as I went on and on and on in my presentations, like I would just, it was like practicing free throws. Like eventually, like I could just stand at the line and 100%. So
Yeah. That's great. Practice does make perfect for sure. And preparation. So let me ask you this, you're dealing with stakeholders, whether they're customers, they're investors, they're partners, right? Like you're the official skate sharpener of the NHL now, or the official at-home skate sharpener. So you have to convince the NHL to try this thing and then use it, and et cetera, et cetera. And they certainly didn't think they had a need. These are the best hockey players in the world. They always have perfect skates because their trainers take care of it. Like, so you have skeptical audiences all the way around, or people who don't realize that they might need this thing. Um, any good anecdotes about how you overcame that skepticism or help them understand their needs might be different than they thought they were, and or horrific failures? And it doesn't have to be from the skate sharpening; it can be from whole logic days, or any other time.
yeah, and I think it's a great thing that you bring up about skeptics and anyone who's, an entrepreneur trying to blaze a trail and create an innovative product. Um, and it's so easy to be a skeptic because,
Yeah.
you know, businesses fail at a very high rate. And so you look like a genius if you basically say no to everybody or find flaws at every idea, because most probably won't make it. And so as an entrepreneur and starting a product, um, in a category that's not super sexy. It's not cloud computing. It's not AI. It's not medical devices. I received a lot of skepticism. The
Not
one,
to mention it's a very niche product. Like who plays hockey? Like it must be tiny, right?
yeah, and my answer to that, to not go on too much of a tangent, was the the focus that I had and the very niche identification, the both the product, the market, but still sizable. 6 to 10 million people skate worldwide that I could solve this problem for, which was for me as a medical device engineer, very much sort of a clinical condition that we would go after as medical device companies. So it was like in that same scale. I thought that was, and I had to convince or explain to people how that was an advantage. I'm not going after AI. I'm not competing with Google, but I have a big enough problem that is still under the radar that I don't have a lot of people trying to go after it. And so if we can solve it, especially from an intellectual property standpoint, we can just carpet bomb this area with intellectual property patents that cover our solution. And that's actually an advantage. So
Mhm.
that's the niche concept. Convincing people that had an alternative solution that was not meeting the needs of the customer um, was a challenge. On the consumer side, it was actually quite easy, especially because I was the customer. I knew other customers like you. We did a survey monkey in the early days, and so I surveyed a couple hundred people that I had played hockey with from coast to coast throughout my life until I was whatever I was around 35. So I'd played a lot of hockey in a lot of places, and I did this survey monkey, and like on the consumer side, everybody got it. Like everybody was like, "Yep, that's a problem. I don't have
Yeah.
a solution." And every company making skate sharpening equipment was solving problems of the commercial sharpener, right? Because their customer was the person in the retail location or in the rink that was providing the service, but the end consumer, the sort of the final stop on that train, those people were completely unsatisfied.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
actually,
because
let me pause for like a half a second, just explain to our audience, since probably 99% of them don't play hockey or figure skate or whatever. The way this thing works is, first of all, you need sharp skates to skate well. So every certain number of times you go on the ice, your blades get dull and then you start falling down. You got to get your skate sharpened regularly. The only way to do it the old way was you'd had to go to a skate shop or the rink, and they had some teenager with pimples who didn't know what they were doing. So you get a bad job done most of the time, but it would take time for you to drive there, get your skates sharpened, and then take them home. And like I said, half time it wouldn't be done well. So that was the status quo. So this idea of being able to just do it yourself in your house was a huge game changer, and that's the problem that Russ is describing. So sorry. So yeah, that there's a real need
no,
there.
great,
Consumers knew
yeah,
it, but then the commercial side is what the most of the other skate sharpener businesses were actually aiming at. They were selling skate sharpeners to stores, not to people.
and the other thing to add to what Bill just said is um, the need for skate sharpening isn't on a Wednesday morning at 10:30 on a weekday. Everyone needs skate sharpening at the exact same time on Saturday morning. So not only do you have to like drive there, wait, you're in line with everyone else. And
Yeah.
so the real unmet need, if you kind of back to you talk about it in the book Five Whys, like you start asking like hey, you need your skate sharpened, like why is that a hassle? Oh, because I have to drive to the store. Okay, so is it the driving that's the hassle? Well, actually, no, it's that when I would normally drive to the store, it's not open. Oh, okay. So when do you sharpen skates? Another question. W question. Oh, well, I sharpen skates at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Oh, well, obviously the store is not going to be open. So do you need a skate sharpening at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday? Well, sometimes it's at Friday at 10 p.m. Okay, well, it's not going to be open then either. And so it was very clear that the solution had to be someone being able to control this themselves. And and so jumping around a little bit, like in the process of coming up with the idea, we have to rule out, or we have to narrow down what the solutions are. So there are a dozen ways to allow somebody to get sharp skates at 12 o'clock on a Friday night or 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Some of them just don't make practical sense. And so we then whittled it down to it's got to be a I use this, the analogy of a coffee maker. It's got to be like a Keurig coffee maker that you can sharpen skates on.
Yeah.
Once we had that, to your question that got us here, is now I've got to convince people that it works, and it works well, and it's repeatable and reliable. And one of the challenges with the existing technology that we eventually displaced was that the expert was running it. And so you had this very experienced 20-year veteran operating this machine like a concert pianist playing a piano. They could make that machine make beautiful music. We needed this completely automated product at home to be able to compete with that, because that's who was going to judge us.
Yeah.
And so we had to really kind of throw all the engineering at this thing to make it incredibly accurate, very reliable, repeatable. And so we were able to get it into the consumer's hands after the Kickstarter. And then ultimately we went into the NHL. And with that, from a stakeholder whispering tie-in, is we went to the NHL Equipment Managers show, which happens every June somewhere in the country after the NHL Stanley Cup is awarded. All the equipment managers, before they go on vacation, go to one location, and we meet all the vendors, meet the equipment managers, and prepare for the next year. We went there and showed our product to who was like one of the sort of most admired, respected equipment managers in all of the NHL. And we shared this product with them, and they sharpened the skates. And, like someone who's an expert wine taster, they sharpen the skates on our product, and then they use their tools to measure it, and with their fingers feel it and rub their hands down it. And then they looked to all of the other equipment managers that were in the booth with us, and they kind of gave it a thumbs up, and then we were just off to the races. So we needed that validation from the expert.
So let's talk about a little bit before that, because all right, you had the engineering, you've solved the problem, you get the key person to see it, evidence this thing works. I mean, this is unfair to say, but that's the easy part, right? Like, you've actually solved the problem, you get the right person in the room, and then miracles can occur. But when you're meeting with your first angel investors or VCs or whoever, you raise money from at the very beginning, most of whom maybe didn't play hockey, had no clue about the need. You can explain it to them, but you're still trying to whisper to them to explain to them that this really is a need, folks, and we really do know how to solve it. Were there any, more to that skepticism? How did you solve that problem? Did you have any investors who were like, dude, you're out of your mind, no way, and you actually won them over? And what was it that won them over, other than the anecdote you already described about having good answers to those questions?
Yeah. Some more tips and tricks from the entrepreneurial journey. I'd say with fairly good certainty and success, or failure, I guess, most people, 99.9% of people who didn't understand the problem didn't invest.
Yeah.
And so I learned pretty quickly that there was kind of like two groups I didn't waste too much time with. People who didn't understand the problem intuitively. And so that was, like you said, most VCs, institutional investors, because, that's who entrepreneurs go get money from. And so that was I was strike out, strike out, strike out. And those are very uncomfortable meetings. You're trying to find parking in cities. Usually you're lugging your stuff up into elevators. And so it was completely uncomfortable and completely unsuccessful. And then the second group was people who understood the problem, but very quickly either said it's too small, it doesn't scale, someone that just didn't feel as though the solution was going to be something worthy of making an investment in. I learned very quickly to just run, just get out of there, go to the next person. And so I didn't waste a lot of time trying to convince people of the problem. Most investment came from people who were yep, got the exact same problem. And if you can solve this is a winner of an idea. Some people still may have thought it was a small market and not kind of the profile of investment opportunity they would go after. but
Yeah.
it was almost always somebody who intuitively understood the problem.
That brings up a key point that I make in the book, which is you can't whisper the unwhisperable. There are some people who cannot be convinced. They'll never understand. They'll never dig in. They'll never even engage with you to dig in, and that's okay. Yeah, you have to know when to move on, and pre-qualify people for their whisperability in those situations. Which just sounds like, yeah, you had a pretty clear idea of who they were pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, I
I think it's a good point where you meet a lot of people. I think there are definitely, you can split the, groups of people broadly into people who are listeners and who are not listeners.
yeah.
And if
And
your radar as an entrepreneur picks up a non-listener, don't waste your time.
yeah, and you bring up an important point. Like it is like radar. It's. And I mentioned in the book. It's ironically because the most of the book is about how you have to sort of disregard your subconscious, because your subconscious response to, like, when your boss tells you to do something is to just go do it. And the reason we choose the task that we work on, or that our bosses assign, is because the subconscious response. Oh, I have data. I should make a dashboard. Oh, you need sharp skates. I should go to the store. And that subconscious response is what gets us into trouble. At the same time, your subconscious response, your gut, your intuition, your radar will sometimes help you recognize things like, oh, this person is not going to really engage with me, move on. And so it's this push pull between completely being skeptical of your own subconscious and also knowing when to sort of engage with it and trust it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
We're running out of time, Russ. I know you had other anecdotes to share and other ideas, but any final thoughts, any sort of words of wisdom from your experience in just like you said, you broke in new ground. You launched a new category. You really innovated. This is innovation, true innovation. And so, any final thoughts that you can share with our audience about how to sort of engage with stakeholders and make successes like this happen?
I think the concept of ideas can come from anywhere, and throughout the process of building this company and now releasing, I don't even know, 10 products over the dozen years that we've been at this, is that so many features that are just like foundational in our product. Like, and I'll tell one example is early on as an engineering exercise, we were taking apart different products and seeing how the mechanisms worked, and we were sharing this with our industrial designer, who we had hired to help us with the kind of the look of the product. And in one of these instances, we had one of our early prototypes, and we had put like a fishbowl on it so that we could study the mechanism and how the mechanism was interacting with the skate blade. And this industrial designer came in and there's 2 points here, didn't know that we had put the fishbowl on there for an engineering reason, but saw it and was like, oh my, I love this idea. The ability to see the sharpening process. And we're like, no, that we just put the window on there so we could see how the mechanism moved and whether or not it would bounce or how it was. They're like, really? Like, oh, I thought that was the idea. He's like, and so it went from like this thing that they misunderstood to being like part of the DNA of Sparks. Was we were the first skate sharpener, professional, consumer, whatever, that had like made the act of skate sharpening completely visible to the user. It was like a refrigerator door that's glass, so you could see everything in the refrigerator. And so that became so important to our product. And I'd say, as a bigger concept, before we break, is that we coined this, and it may not make sense, but we have a term for this at our office because it's happened so many times. We call it reverse osmosis idea concepts, reverse osmosis sublimation idea generation, I think is what has been kind of thrown around. And the concept here generally is that many times, like too many times to count, we've been in like brainstorm meetings or like branding meetings or advertising meetings where somebody actually misunderstands what somebody else is saying. And then they go up to riff on the idea on the whiteboard, and everybody else is in the room like, no, that's not what they said. but the misunderstanding caused this other person to actually create a fantastic idea
Yeah.
to start building off of. And it's like a little bit of contrarian kind of concept here, which is like even people who aren't completely listening sometimes hear enough little pieces that their brain creates a totally new idea that's even better than the thing the person was saying. And there
Right.
are dozens of those in our history of somebody misunderstanding a concept and coming up with something completely new that we all riffed off of.
Right. Well, it's funny that, full circle. We started off, you talked about listening and how brainstorming sessions, it's always the quiet person at the end who comes up with the best idea. Well, here we are at the end, talking back sort of back to that brainstorming process where sometimes, all right, it's the loud person who's like about to what on that bad idea they thought they heard, but they misunderstood it, but that leads to another idea. So yeah,
Yep.
it's all, listening, percolating, mishmashing, but the key is that we all are open to these things, and we're subduing our subconscious response and essentially allowing the best idea to percolate to the top in whichever way it happens, because that's the key thing.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, Russ, I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm sure our audience has gained a lot from this conversation. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, and for everybody else, I will see you again next week. Take care.